My name is Moriba Jah, and I'm an aerospace engineering and engineering mechanics professor at the University of Texas at Austin, where I lead a transdisciplinary research program in space safety, security, and sustainability. And I've partnered with SpaceWatch.Global to start a new series of web talks, cafes, space cafes called Moriba's VOX POPULI, which is Latin for people's voice. So I hope to see you there. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be candid conversations about all sorts of stuff related to space safety, security, and sustainability. I am a space watcher.
It's Thursday afternoon in Switzerland. It's Space Café Moriba's VOX POPULI time. Our next edition will begin very soon. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we constantly learn and improve based on the feedback you give us. My name is Clara Monter. I'm the event coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global and host of the Space Café Benelux, together with my co-host Moriba Jah. SpaceWatch is a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And I know that many of you are already very familiar with our website and our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and of course our Space Café podcasts. Our latest episode is another masterpiece by our great host, Marcus Moslecher. He talked to the fantastic Professor Joellen Russell about oceans and space. And actually, Joellen was a guest on one of the previous Moriba's VOX Populi sessions. And for all our fans of audio content, we have started with our Space Café Radio, where we talk with interesting people on the road, on shows and on conferences. And our first episodes are online on our website. For example, my interview with Ayla Hakel and Torsten's interview with Aidan Little about the UNGA Resolution 7536. We also opened our fan shop online, where you can support us actively and become a space watcher. Edition 1 has awesome merchandising products for you, your friends, and the ones you love. And your support is needed to keep our work alive for you. So if you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our webpage in the events section and on our YouTube channel. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to hand you over to your host for today, Professor Moriba Jah. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kara and Torsten and everybody here. This is always a delight to be able to have these webcasts with everybody live and just, keeping it real, down to earth, and just getting into the weeds of a whole variety of subjects. Today, we're going to talk about some interesting things. And I think some of what motivates today's session about behaviors and things like that in space is that for some time, I've been involved in this whole idea of space situational awareness for a while now, since about 2006. And, there's always this idea of norms of behavior. You have more people talking about this, folks in the United States Department of Defense talking about it, people in Europe, across the globe. How do we get to these norms of behavior in space? How important are these things? Well, we have lots of satellites that we're launching every few weeks. We're launching things so frequently that we're not even giving Mother Nature the chance to provide us feedback on, unintentional consequences of our actions and that sort of stuff. It would be nice if we had some rules of the road and some protocols and practices to make things better, to make things safer, to make things more sustainable in space, and to certainly avoid any sort of knee-jerk reactions and misinterpretations, escalatory type of responses that might lead to conflict. We don't want that. Conflict in space, conflict utilizing space, that sort of thing we want to try to minimize, if not completely mitigate altogether. And so one of the things, right, when it comes to this is I started this whole thing in space out by being a security guard. I was a missile cop. I was Airman Moriba Jah, stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, guarding Minuteman II and Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles. At the time, a lot of them were certainly, I'm sure, were targeting then the Soviet Union. I have my colleague Yury Razoumny here to show you that, you know, Americans and Russians do get along. It's okay. We can have a pillow fight and tickle each other from time to time at school. But you know, I was taught that a threat required the concurrent existence of three things: opportunity to cause harm, capability to cause harm, and intent to cause harm. Opportunity and capability, those are things that, you know, we can get some sense of from physical sensors, radars, telescopes, that sort of stuff. I happen to have some folks here, as you know, my guests that have something to say about those physical sensors, right? We hear about dual use technology, meaning that, you know, one person's grappling hook for on-orbit servicing can be another person's grappling hook for intentionally harming somebody else, right? We're not going to prevent technology from getting into space. Certainly, it doesn't make any sense to try to do that. And so the question really then surrounds intent. How do we infer intent in space? And back to the idea of these norms, can we develop some protocols and practices that kind of put the intent piece that address the intent piece, so that we know in advance we can predict outcomes, right? I mean, if we have some practices that we can put in place that help us predict an outcome from some event, some you know, joint coordination planning of activities, if we can predict things, that tends to remove our hands from the red buttons around the globe. So we're certainly interested in that. And then the other thing too is, even though we have space laws, treaties, we have lots of them, the question is, how are people interpreting and implementing these things? And is there any evidence that the interpretation and implementation of these things, the practice of space operations, is there any evidence that cultural differences can explain the observed behavior that we see across different space actors? And even how these people, you know, might quantify a threat, how these people might interpret actions in terms of intent. So I know that that's a lot. I usually like starting off these things with some key thoughts and kind of lay the groundwork for at least where the discussion begins. And so with that, you know, I would like to very much welcome my guests. We have Thierry Blanche from SAFRAN, Stewart Bain from NorthStar, Earth and Space in Canada. We have Professor Yury Razoumny from RUDN University in Moscow in Russia. We have Dr. Darren McKnight, who now is at LEOLabs as a senior technical fellow. And we have Dr. Doug Hendrix, who is the CEO of ExoAnalytic. And so with that, the way I like doing this stuff is kind of just open it up, and you know, anybody that wants to say something and just kind of like tee it off, let's go. Who wants to step up and have something to say about this?
I can jump in if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the first part of your opening dialogue, something that it's been a discussion for a long time, which is the intent piece. And I always punt on that. And I think, I mean, you know, our minds can always go in strange places where we say, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Usually in space, it has to do with how close are the satellites getting. And usually it's, you know, between active on active, right, is what people are most interested in. I always say that, you know, if you assume the worst intent, then you're obviously going to make a more extreme reaction. What I would say, though, is it's been about 10, 11 years since we've been watching GEO at ExoAnalytic. And we've kind of watched things evolve from, there being space is big, 10 kilometers is this number everyone throws out as a safe distance that satellites should keep, or you should start really caring if things are within 10. And what we're seeing is for the first time, we're seeing sub 10 kilometer close approaches becoming more common. So we watched our first sub 3 kilometer approach between active satellites that were of different countries several weeks ago. And we even helped an operator through a sub 2 kilometer close approach with a piece of debris. But what I've always felt is that's missing is communication. It's one way, publish your capabilities, publish your plans, and then we can tell whether what we observe makes sense for those. But also, what else I see is lacking is a lot of times when we interact with operators and there's going to be a close approach between actives, there's no communication between operators oftentimes. And I think that's the main problem I see is just quite simply lack of sharing of information and communication.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that very much, Doug. Anybody else want to chime in?
Moriba, maybe me?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Yury.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for invitation to participate in this very interesting presentation. And I would like to tell that the theme is more than important now. I would like to say that really the number of space actors increase every year, and I would like to make some ideas of how to analyze this situation. First of all, we can see that each year the space domain is changing much, and it is not just big corporations, startup companies that are making the space infrastructure. Let's call them space actors of first type. But there are many new space actors that are consumers of space services, and let's call them actors of the second type. It's important, this difference. All of them have their own cultural approaches to implement space services, and we have just few actors of first type and huge number of actors of the second type. I think it is the last one are the most dangerous and important to consider. Due to big space collaboration and partnership on different regional levels, many countries now, and in Africa, North America, Asia, are pursuing space programs for a variety of different space utilities. And as a result, this entry of new actors in space bring both opportunities and challenges. And the major risk here, as I told you before, is coming from the actors of the second type, and it is the impact of norms of behavior. For instance, the norm of not testing anti-satellite missiles that prevailed for decades appear to be weakening. The established players who have shaped these norms appear less likely to break those norms as compared to new players who are less bound with them. So new players consider that these norms are a way to restrict their freedom and country development, and they are less likely to play by them. In this situation, it seems to be very important to to estimate the intentions of new actors in advance. The question is, by what means? By what means? First, what is evident, negotiations, new agreements. You told that, you reminded the area of Soviet Union, and I would like to tell that now is another time, another challenges, another situations, but the problems are mostly the same, but we take into account that we have much more actors. I would like to tell you that now not only negotiations and agreements we have to consider, but we need now to analyze, to estimate the regional development of space services. which is the biggest source of new actors of the second type, which are characterized by tendency of violence of the rules established by the gears of space era. So with the reference of the issue which discussed, indeed, no physical sensors, as you wrote in your program, will be able to determine the intent of the place, the space domain, but we have to implement forecasts, we have accumulate different kind of information and structure this information in order to understand the necessary intent of different places, especially I would like to stress again, the actors from the second type. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Yury. Let's go around. Anybody else?
So Moriba, I'm going to take a step back. I think a lot of times all of us engineers and scientists who are working in space want to do things like, if we give people data, then we'll build trust. And if we build trust, then there won't be any negative intent. And I think that's a little bit myopic and a little naive. I'm going to share my screen because there's something that I did a few years back called the innovation value chain. And I applied this to national space policy, and I apply a lot when it comes to normal behavior in space. And I think we all want to jump up to achieve goal, be sustainable, be safe, but we're kind of making a lot of assumptions. And so really what this whole thing says is you have to communicate before you cooperate. You have to cooperate before you collaborate. You have to collaborate before you innovate, which means solve a problem, right? And what we do, we want to jump up here. We want to innovate and do great things and do joint execution, but we don't have trust and clarity of terms. We don't have a shared vision. And as a result, we don't have joint execution. And so I think a lot of times it's, we use these words like communicate, cooperate, collaborate interchangeably. They're not interchangeable. They're building up process. And I think sometimes it's interesting when we say things like, we're going to, we need to have trust. But do we ever really actually ask, like Yury just talked about all these new operators? Some of them don't care about sustainability. They care about the bottom line. They want to make money. They want to show that they're a space power. And I think we often assume things that people want, because who wouldn't want space to be sustainable? But I think there's a lot of people who don't. And as a result, when we make the assumption, right, as I think you, Moriba, you touched on it earlier, unstated assumptions, right, unintended consequences of our own actions, that we're thinking we're all alike. So this is a little bit like an engineering model, and I apologize for that. But I think it touches on issues that we have to grapple with. And your original question was about, if somebody had, if we assume bad intent, are we going to do the worst thing? And I said, well, here's the thing. Moriba, you and I go running all the time, right? Do we assume that the drivers are going to avoid us and care about us? I don't. I assume they get points for hitting me. Yeah. I assume they get points for hitting me. And as a result, I'm still running, right? If I assumed they were all smart and nice and wanted to avoid me, I probably wouldn't be running anymore, right? Because I'd gotten hit. So I think we need to maybe more personalize this message about communicate to cooperate, cooperate to collaborate. And I try really hard to do that sometimes. And people think sometimes I'm not action oriented or I'm being pedantic, but really I'm trying to get to the root issue. What are the needs and wants of the other players? And that's what really matters. And that's when I think we make a mistake. So thank you.
No, thank you, Darren. I can tell that maybe Stewart, you want to say something? You've been nodding and stuff in the back. I know you're gelling on stuff, man, but as the environmentalist here, what's up?
I think Yury touched on a lot of things, and everyone's touching on the subject of, you can't assume that everyone comes to the plate at the same level. We're not all equal in space. And when there's an inequality, your intent is related to a different agenda, because if we were all billionaires, we wouldn't be talking about money. But we're not all billionaires. So there's different agendas based on people's needs, and people in some contexts means corporations, in other contexts means countries. And all countries are not equal in space. and access to space is something that's very highly regarded and very strategic. And so we get into the gray area of, interpreting people's, all the I's that you used. You used intent, you used infer intent, you used interpretation. Those I words make my radar go up in terms of how are you ever going to solve that problem? Because, the difference, as we all know, between hypothesis and theory is hypothesis is a good idea. Theory is that hypothesis has now stood the test of time. And we've actually able to predict based on a theory. You can't predict based on a hypothesis. And so hypothesis means conjecture, means interpretation, means trying to take a second guess of someone's intent. Really what I think we're looking for is a very good understanding and way to observe what's going on in space that will stand the test of time, that will give us enough information so that we can actually be confident in our hypothesis converting into theories, and people's behaviors will adjust according to the raising of the bar of the ability to observe, monitor, and ultimately people will cooperate because they have to, not because it's a good thing to trust one another. That's not the motivation. You cannot impose on unequal countries and unequal players the same script. They're not going to play by the same script. The role of Queen Victoria will not be played by Johnny Depp today. He doesn't play that part, okay? So we all have different things that we bring to the table. We have to respect those. That's a very difficult thing to do in a global environment and an exploding global environment. But even scientific theory contradicts itself in the best of circumstances. Look at the quick model. Uranus, Neptune, when they were looking at Uranus, they said, there's something wrong with it. It's not following the laws of physics. Hence, they discovered Neptune. They said, Neptune's affecting its orbit. So then they said, well, Mercury, what about Mercury? Well, Mercury's not obeying the laws of physics. It's that Uranus-Neptune thing. There's this planet called Vulcan that's affecting it, but we can't see it because Vulcan's too close to the sun. Lo and behold, there is no planet Vulcan. It's because the laws of physics don't apply that well when you're that close to the sun. So we all come up with theories about what's going on. And to bring it sort of present day, even Thomas Pesquet, the International Space Station astronaut, was taking pictures of blue lights in the sky that decades ago we had no explanation for. Now we know that it's these elves and sparks and whatever they call it. They've got great names for it, but things that didn't exist before are now becoming known. So space is full of unknowns. And when you're full of unknowns, you better be careful how you impose intent, because, that's how we had the Cuban Missile Crisis. You start to go sideways when you impose intent and assume bad intent or assume malignant intent. It's not a healthy relationship. Scientific information, good information, raising the bar on information, I think is what you've been preaching and what I would like to support. So I think that's a way through the path.
Booyah, my brother, booyah. So Thierry, here's your chance to chime in, my friend.
Yeah, very interesting discussion. And thank you, Moriba, for your invitation. As you notice, I'm French, but I just talk on my name. Okay, I'm not representing any nation or whatever. But it's very interesting to start first from vocabulary and the understanding of words. And you said, threat and predict and international and all those things. But what is a thread? Okay, when you have no rules defined. Okay, it's hard to say. First thing. And I like the analogy from Darren, and I like to push this analogy a bit further. I believe it's not so much cultural differences, but it's cognitive. Means when your kid 3 years old want to crawl the street. Okay, there is no danger. There's no threat for him. He has no knowledge of what's going around. And when you are 20 years old, you believe you can go through and avoid everything. Okay, you feel strong, fit, and so. When you go across the same road with your kids, you have different behavior. And when you are old, there is threat everywhere. Okay, so where are we in this process of it's more cognitive, how you feel, you get the information and how you interpret this information. And on top of this, for what will be interesting is to have a transparency on space. Means everybody knows everything and we share and communicate. Okay, means since like Doug, we were working in this and looking in the sky and looking to things, new things we didn't know before. But knowing that we can see, look, and report things in the sky, people may first behave better. Okay, or and having rules can be a police. Also, in case rule exists, we could police those rules. What I wanted to say, we have lots of unknown, as Stewart was saying, and we have to go further in the time to get less and less unknown parameter to have a better view and to not to interpret, but to have a clear view of what's going on.
No, thank you, Thierry. So I appreciate that. Everybody's like chimed in with something. So now I'm gonna maybe say a few things. Some of this is going to be personal for me, but that's just the way that I do stuff, and we'll see where the discussion goes from there. So I like what you said, Thierry, about this idea of, you know, this whole dimension of kind of when you're young, your idea of risk, right? I mean, really, that's kind of what you're talking about, right? In terms of threats, but really risk, right? The 3-year-old doesn't really comprehend, doesn't see the risk in crossing the street. The old person sees a lot of risk in that sort of stuff. I think that a lot of that comes from experience, right? And so I think to Stewart's point, we're not all equal in space. We don't come in with the same experience. And I think this gets to some of what Yury was saying as well, right? You have new entrants and that sort of stuff. So for one, before I open this up for more discussion, I think this is a clear role for capacity building. If the knowledge and experience in space is uneven, then the practice is also going to be uneven, right? So to me, there's a role for capacity building in trying to even out that. And certainly you can't, as much as I want to with some people, right? Even if I tell them about my experiences, it doesn't mean that they don't understand it in the same way that I do because I've lived through it, right? So some knowledge can be transferred, easily to people, but other stuff, people just have to actually experience it. I think MIT's model for learning is learn by teaching, learn by doing. There's something to be said about learning by doing. So I think that's something that we should focus on. When it comes to the cultural stuff, here's some examples, right? And I'd like to kind of plant this for folks to kind of think about, and let's see who wants to chime in when I'm done. But for one, so when I worked on Hayabusa, when I was at JPL, I worked on Hayabusa. We at JPL interfaced with the folks at JAXA for orbit determination, and I was working to support the Earth flyby and all that other stuff. And an interesting thing is that I remember sending emails and things like that to my counterparts at JAXA, and some of them I'd get replies for, and others I'd get no reply whatsoever, none. And it was like, did these people get it? And, you know, is there something wrong with their server and these sorts of things? And finally, I had a Japanese friend of mine that said, you actually got your answer in the non-response. The fact that they didn't reply, that meant no, that they weren't going to come out and just tell you no. Their reply was tacit. It was implicit in the absence of communication. That's a cultural difference that I had to then interpret in my way of how to basically find a way to harmonize the work in orbit determination with folks at JAXA. I've been to Asia a few times, and I can tell you that while respect is a big thing in Asian cultures, having grown up in Western civilization, my idea of personal space is different over there, right? When I'm walking around, people are bumping into me all the time, like, what's going on? Like, this person's like really close. Don't they see that I'm like right here and all that other stuff? But for them, culturally, there's a different sense and interpretation to what personal space is. Some of the things that I've wondered is when satellites are getting close to each other, we in the United States consider close anything that's within the same orbit, which I think is to me, it's like completely ludicrous and doesn't make sense, right? I hear people here in the United States saying, oh, well, you know, maybe we should allocate orbital altitudes per. No, we don't do that with air traffic, right? I mean, we have air vectors. When a plane takes off from Austin, Texas to go to San Francisco, several planes are on that path, right? We phase these things. It's not like, well, no other plane from Austin to San Francisco can happen until the one that left Austin like lands in San Francisco. We don't do that. So the thing is, this whole allocation of just give me a whole orbital shell, that doesn't make sense. So this idea of culture and the way we interpret these things, I think there's something to be explored there. I think there's some evidence that cultural differences can make a difference in how we communicate, back to what Darren said, which I fully agree. You know, I love Darren's kind of systems engineering of looking at stuff. For sure, going to the end, let's implement stuff. I think we're rushing, right? I think we need to get to the bottom floor, which is the communicate, even understand how we communicate with each other, right? Back to you, Stewart, you talked about the eyes and the interpretation and that sort of stuff. I mean, here's something personal that shows cultural difference. When I was 6 years old, so my mom's from Haiti, my father's from Sierra Leone. I don't know why they got together, but they did. I was the result of them doing that. And my father Muslim, my mother not, you know, Christian. And in any case, at the age of 2, they got divorced for reasons. I won't get too deep into it, but I will say that my interpretation, my experience was my father was very abusive, verbally, physically, these sorts of things. So he had visitation rights. And at the age of 6, he actually kidnapped me. My father kidnapped me, and I was kidnapped for like 9 days. Cops found me 9 days later, someplace in the Bay Area, put me on a plane back to my mom, that sort of thing. And never saw my father again. Talked to him. Basically 3 months from him passing away, I was able to speak to him. He was back in Sierra Leone. And I asked him why was he so like abusive and violent and stuff? And he said that he wasn't. It was just cultural differences. And you know, it took me a long time to get to meet more people from Sierra Leone and to understand what that actually meant. Like some people, basically their interpretation of what I experienced, which was pretty crappy, there's like, you know what? Our interpretation is that he actually loved you. He cared enough to kidnap you. So the thing is, cultural differences, that's actually a thing. And what I considered harmful and abusive, somebody else considered their version of care. So I think there's something to be unpacked and unraveled in this idea of cultural differences. If this makes a difference in human behavior on the surface, to think that it doesn't manifest itself in space, I think might be a bit naive. But I've talked a lot. Let's open it up. Anybody have anything to say based on all the things that I just kind of splurged?
Yeah, I want to go back to something that Yury and Stewart said, and I think it ties into what you just said, Moriba. And when we're talking about interpreting others' actions, we're not all coming from an equal place. And I like to go back to you brought up the age of exploration before we got on here, which was there was a time when Spain and Portugal and England and others were exploring the world, and they, that was good for their countries. And right now, folks are exploring space. They're moving hardware up into space because presumably it meets a need of their country or their company, like you said. And then there was a point in the age of world exploration when it had all been explored and all of the resources that could be gained were gained. And then we get into the modern age where a lot of those countries they're what we call developed nations. But we still have nations in the world that we call developing. And, right now there's a little bit of a tension between developing nations and, let's say, the use of fossil fuels is the best way for them to improve their way of life. And then we have the developed nations saying, hey, don't burn those because we've already advanced to the point where we don't need that. And we have different ways of producing power, maybe, or cleaner. And I think in space, there's a great analogy there. As we're watching what right now is a rush, for different orbit regimes, GEO being a little different than LEO. So maybe 20 years ago was the GEO gold rush, which I like to call it, which is they opened up the slots. Everyone got a slot. A lot of the companies that operate in GEO, the entire worth of the company is just the slot. The slot is their intellectual property. And we've seen that already play itself out, and the geosynchronous regime has become somewhat well managed. It's a more advanced place to do operations. You're watching, cooperation. You're watching some communication. When I look at what's happening in LEO, little different story. And I think what we're watching is a rush. And intentions in some cases you might say are clear, in some cases aren't clear. But a lot of what I see, I think there's some cultural there too, but there's also countries trying to catch up and make sure they don't miss the boat when the LEO orbit regime or even GEO becomes baked in with rules and regulations and procedures. They may have missed the boat, and they don't, if it's money, if it's, geopolitical influence, they will miss the boat. And that's a lot of what I see. I see countries and companies making sure that they stake their claim. Anyway, just throwing that out there.
No. I love that, man. And let's see. I mean, for sure. So I like bringing in some audience people. Before we go to more people here, let's bring in Hussein, who's pretty passionate with some questions relevant to what we're talking about here. Hussein?
Yeah, thanks, Moriba, as always. Gentlemen, I just have one question and one question only. You guys have been in this game for such a long time. You've done research and you've progressed the industry in a positive direction. Yet we're not there where we need to be in order to move away from just having these conversations and go into actually more action-oriented items. So why do you think that we will achieve this in the next 10 years, essentially? Why now and moving beyond technology, because technological advancements, sure, but moving beyond that, why do you think we'll be able to achieve that?
That's a great question. I'd love for somebody here to take that. Here we go, Stewart.
Because I have faith in humanity. It starts with that. You have to start with a philosophy. I've worked in Japan. I've worked in France many years. And what I learned from the Japanese, a lot of what you referred to, by the way, Moriba, that expression, there's an expression for not getting an answer. It's called mokusatsu. I speak Japanese. Mokusatsu means standing forest. When you ask the forest a question, it doesn't give you an answer. You just ask.
I love that. I love that, man.
In France, if you don't have a philosophy, it's what I learned is if you don't have a philosophy, you really have no basis of doing anything. You must have a philosophy. But if you want to talk to an American about his philosophy, he's going to want to lock you up for maybe being a communist. It's craziness. It's just people have such cultural different perspectives on what's going on. If you read a lot of books in the United States, then what's wrong with you? But if you're not reading a lot of books in France, it's like, well, what's the matter with your philosophy? And so we really have these differences. But humanity, to get back to the question, has always done the same thing. If you talk about norms of behaviors, we've always done the same thing. So it's like the police officer, nothing to see here, folks, just keep moving along. Everything's going like it's always been going. We develop technology, we pollute, and then we clean it up. Okay, so now we're doing the same thing to space. We're creating an Anthropocene in space, a scene of man-made objects, human-made objects in space. We're creating a mess, and we're talking about cleaning it up. And what we need to do this time, unlike every other time, is really get out in front of it so that it doesn't become an impossible mess that we can't clean up. And humanity will do the right thing. And humanity speaks back to what is fundamentally everybody's intent. So the biggest players who have the most advantage in space actually are the most vulnerable. Why? Because they have the most to lose. If they lose space, they have the most to lose. And so they will do the right thing. We will find a way to cooperate in space. And instead of the I words, it'll be C words. It'll be cooperation. It'll be consideration. It'll be communication. It'll be those words that bring us together, because in the end, we know we can't do without space. Adam Jonas at Morgan Stanley said, space is existential to our existence and to our economy. Our economy depends on space. That's a big enough driver for everybody to say, we're going to do the right thing. So we will find the right way. It's not clear. It's like everything. The signal to noise ratio, a lot of noise, not a lot of signal. There's a lot of noise going on, but the signal is the messages like you're enforcing here, like you're encouraging here, Moriba, the human element that no matter what flag you're flying or no flag at all, we all know that we must protect space. It's essential. And that's the human factor. And that will be the difference. And like Muhammad Ali said, impossible is just a word for small people with small minds and no imagination. It's impossible is nothing. So that's how we'll get it done.
I love that, man. Booyah, booyah. Yury, I can see your lips twitching, man. Go ahead.
Moriba, if you don't mind, I would like to continue and develop the idea of Stewart. Indeed, it is necessary to consider the cultural and psychological factors that are especially important for estimation of behavior of space actors. Certainly, yes. We have many good examples of international cooperation and know how to work together. And I like your joke or maybe idea how you receive replies for your messages. I should say that we have to speak not only about differences, but also about similarities. And there is one of similarities between you, for instance. I know you, I send you messages and I reply all the time messages from you if I send something for you. The same about me. So we reply, all of us. We in all cases we say yes or no, but we reply. And it's very important now to say on the high level that we should reply in all cases. If somebody will not reply, it's a mark. It's a issue to think about it. Why it could be happened and the reason of this. And so the main idea is we have to reply in all cases. If we will do it, we will not have any problems due to cultural differences, similarities, and etc., etc. Thank you.
No, I like that a lot. And just to pull on that string a little bit, Yury, and back to what we talked about in terms of my experience with JAXA, and then Stewart followed up, is I'm sure that there are plenty of Japanese airline pilots, and when the air traffic control speaks to them, they're going to get a reply every time from that pilot, right? So it's like, so even though we can talk about the cultural differences can't become barriers to us being able to get some sort of standardized set of protocols and practices, for sure. So I think we can look at other domains and see how it's done, been done successfully, lessons learned, and then apply these to space. So I really appreciate that. Kathleen Lewis, you wanna come on stage and ask some stuff?
Yes, I'm a curator at the Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian, and my concern is these are very nuanced issues, and as a public historian, I'm at a loss as how I convey these messages to the public. How do I educate the public that this is not, we are no longer in this two-character conflict of U.S. versus Soviet, and that so much of our collection and our storytelling is invested in that, but we need to find a way to give this nuanced story to our public so they understand what is occurring in the next generation. And do you have any suggestions?
I definitely want to hear from the rest of the guests here, but I can tell you from me, what I really appreciated that you just said is storytelling. I think we need to become better at that, and I think the better storytellers we can be with telling this story, the better the public will be at being able to understand these nuances. Ideas that I have, sure. I mean, look, and we've spoken to folks, from the Smithsonian Institute's, National Air and Space Museum about mixed reality experiences, right? Basically, because this whole webcast is one thing, right? But I don't know. I mean, I became a space environmentalist because something shifted within me by me observing and experiencing disparities amongst indigenous people and seeing ecological unsustainability on Maui, Alaska, these sorts of things. And so I kind of like storytelling for sure. Texas Immersive here at UT is leading this project, Eyes on the Sky, but it's like we need to be better storytellers if we want to enroll humanity and help them understand these nuances. So that's kind of like my suggestion, but certainly I'd love to hear from other people here on the panel.
Well, I would ask the question. I would ask the question, when people ask me about, is space debris a problem, they'll want to know two things. How does it affect their life, right? And so, for example, collisions that we've had in LEO, I would have a hard time explaining how it affects anyone's life today. I think that people look at space debris the way they look at environmental concerns, or, there's always some area, whether you think it's global warming. Back in the day, we had the year 2000 problem. Space debris might impact our access to space. And as a person who doesn't know everything about everything, a lot of times I think, oh, the smart people will figure it out. And I so far haven't seen any impact to my daily life, so I'm not sure why I care. And when I look at the space debris problem, for example, a really good example at GEO was when in Indonesia, they lost all the point of sale devices when Telecom 1 had that unplanned debris event. And that impacted people's lives for a few days, but then they offloaded the communications to other satellites, and then the ATMs were back on, and everyone's life was good. I do have trouble explaining to people that it might be a problem that the probability of collision of a piece of debris with the International Space Station could possibly increase the risk to astronauts, and they might have to hole up for a while. It's really difficult to communicate that impact to an average person. To be quite honest, I'm as one who's a technologist who spends all of my time working on technologies to make the problem better. I feel like I have failed to really communicate to anybody why they should care and why they shouldn't just go off and watch Seinfeld reruns or whatever they like to do. Until Seinfeld turns off, I think it's going to be difficult to communicate this message.
Thanks for that, Doug. Anybody else?
Yeah, Thierry, I'd just like to come back to Stewart comments. And we see, and then he knows French culture and European more generally. And as he said, we need a philosophy. We need to be something defined. We need to believe in something before to go onto it. And it's very strong in our genes in over Europe. And that's really what's missing for us in space, to have a step forward, to go on standardization, normalization. We need rules to believe in something good for humanity. And it's strong word you said, even you use, Stewart, respect. Yes, we have to respect each other in this space domain. And that's very, very strong. Now it's a big word behind. And about storytelling, behind storytelling, I always understand a nice story, but what I heard currently is more a cow, than the space going to fall over us and things, and so we're polluting the space. And it's I would be pleased to hear about a nice story about what's going on in space, and there are very beautiful things going on, for sure.
Thank you so much. Darren, I know we're going to be losing you soon. I want to give you a chance to say some stuff, brother. Drop some knowledge on us. What's up?
So I think this issue about the cultural differences obviously is very clear. The question is, how do we get over it, right? And I think one of the issues, again, and against Moriba, since you said this is not a technical discussion, this is more holistic. I think there's a really big problem right now with global politics, right? That we sort of have this polarization. Everybody has to be put into a bucket, right? You got to be described as a Democrat or Republican. You're either, you're for space, you're against space. There's a lot of gray areas. But why everything has to be black or white is really, I think, as I'd like to say, the absolutes are absolutely killing us, right? And so one of the things I think we have to do is this part of communicate that I think all of us have talked about, with the C words and the I words. I like Stewart, those two buckets. Those C words, there's a T word that goes in there. It's called tolerance. And I've been writing an essay about tolerance lately. I just finished writing one. And what it really comes down to is why tolerance is important is tolerate somebody long enough to talk to them, to find out whether or not they have a ponytail or a nose ring or earrings or whatever it is that they are, that you think to yourself, well, that isn't appropriate for this situation, and find out that, something to talk long enough to go, we have more in common than we have not in common. So going back to the communicate part, it's not just communicate, because communicate is transmit and receive. And I think oftentimes people think they're communicating when they're talking. No, you're only doing half the job. The other half is listening, and the tolerance of being able to say, I understand that Nigeria put up a 1U CubeSat that maybe isn't really highly functional, but for them, it's a huge step forward, right? And so you've got to be tolerant of letting them learn and respect and applaud that sort of thing. So I think as we go forward, that the basic thing about communication, make sure that we bake tolerance in there, because I think without tolerance, we don't start to really have the transmit and receive that people assume is happening. The lack of talking does not mean you're listening. I know that. You know that. So I think that's something we have to continue to work on as we have these technical committees, as we have these papers, as we have sessions, and don't just go, I'm not going to talk while he's talking, but then I'm going to are you listening? So I appreciate the format of this, and this is the first time I've been on a panel for a whole hour, and we haven't talked about some silly thing with units of kilograms or kilometers per second, and I applaud you for doing that, because I think that's the foundation that's going to allow us to make progress in those more technical areas.
Amen, my brother. I appreciate you, man, as always. And I want to open it up. Anybody else on the panel here have some stuff to say? Yes, Stewart.
Briefly, I'd like to build on Darren's comment. I think he's really got his finger on the pulse, and to reinforce that message. Another way of saying tolerate, to make it even more proactive, is just fundamentally to bring it back to the word that Thierry was using, which is respect. Respecting our differences is embracing humanity. We are all part of the same ecosystem as much as all of us. If you hold your hands up, like some folks say, you will have the chemistry of the entire universe in your hand, from all the planets that surround us. It's in your hand, it flows through your veins, it flows through all of us. Respecting our differences, respecting the fact that when you ask a Japanese person a question, you won't get an immediate answer. Respecting the fact that, at least from my experience, it's not really a great question in the morning to ask a Russian person, how you doing? Because he'll answer exactly how he's doing, and it's not the answer you were expecting. It's really a case of we don't have the same perspectives. In the back of a taxi cab, when Bill Clinton was being put up for impeachment for what was happening with him and Monica Lewinsky, my Toulouse taxi driver said to me, I don't understand. What did he do? I said, well, he had sex with someone. Okay, so what is the problem? I said, so there we go. We don't understand the problem. It's a huge problem in the United States, but yet in France, when Sarkozy was jogging too much, the philosophers in France were saying, he's jogging too much. He's not a thinker. Thinkers walk. This guy's jogging too much. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the headlines in the French newspapers were, he's jogging too much. He's not a good president because he's not a thinker. He's not philosophical enough. So we have to, for the sake of humanity, get muddy, get up to here in each other's dirt, and respect each other's differences. And that's what space is presenting as the final frontier of challenges, and we'll solve it. Why? Because we've always solved our problems. We just have to understand what the problem is that we're trying to solve. The question is, how will we get along in space?
Absolutely. And I got to tell you, the reason people say that about me isn't my running, brother. It's for other. I love it. I love it. All right. So look, I mean, we before I bring anybody else from let's see, we have Ahmed or Pranav. Let's since Ahmed is working on space sustainability rating, I think let's bring Ahmed to see what he has to ask. Ahmed?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, basically there's this effort called Space Sustainability Rating, which is like a rating to, to give to space actors to evaluate their environment impacts. And my question is like, how can you take into account the cultural differences when you take some sort of regulation that's going to apply to everybody, knowing that everybody has their own way of sending things to space, roughly speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. While people think on it a little bit more, I mean, look, people ratify treaties and they interpret it differently now, right? So the thing is, different interpretations, that's just the way of the world. The thing is, and I tell people this, if you want to know something, you have to measure it. So can we get feedback? Can we get data on how people are behaving so that we can start trying to say, okay, here's this treaty that all of us signed. Here's how it's actually being implemented by all these different countries. and if it seems like the implementation is the variance in implementation, if the evidence is that maybe that's not leading to the intent of the treaty, then maybe that's a conversation to have, right? But yeah, there's no way to just get people. There's no way to get people to just interpret and implement things the same way across the globe. Like, that's not going to happen. But at least we can get evidence of how they're interpreting and implementing things, back to the I's again, sorry, so that we can get to the C's, right? The communicate and all that stuff. So that's my answer, but I'd like to see if anybody else here wants to chime in.
Maybe I will continue, Moriba.
Yeah.
We live in a very fragile world, and I think it's a main challenge we have to take into account. I am absolutely sure that all the countries have not intentions to modify all the world, but they would like to modify only the life on their own country. And in this way, maybe it's a kind of answer to this question. Maybe we need to coincide the interests of different countries. And I think it's the possible way, at least possible, to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Yury. Anybody else? All right. How about our common friend here, Angela Matisse?
Hi, Angela from Think Tank Maths in Edinburgh. Fantastic insights on culture and the difference of humanity. But I think you were saying everybody cares. There's an optimism about humanity, but unfortunately, I think there's also fear. When we've all got our territories and land, and we do something to a neighbor who's somewhere else around the world, some of the things we could do could blow back at us, and that's not good. But in space, it is so immediate, and there, it's a bit hackneyed to say that it knows no boundaries. There are no frontiers, and that's quite appropriate, having had the man himself go up yesterday into space. But do you think that will make us more cautious? How we treat space, what we do to each other up there, because if we make a mistake, it's uncontrollable. It'll flow over to someone else's assets, and we'll take it out for everyone, including ourselves. Over.
Yeah. So anybody on the panel have thoughts?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of evidence that any of the players. So right now, going back to the explosion in LEO capabilities, now SpaceX leading the way, and I think it was Stewart who said that when the interests of SpaceX, for example, are at risk, is when SpaceX will take action to mitigate any threat to the environment, the global commons. I haven't seen any evidence that anyone has done anything out of the goodness of preserving the global commons. I've only seen evidence of people preserving their own ability to operate in the global commons, which I actually think is a positive thing. Like Stewart said, I think it will be, as long as we don't make a big boo-boo and really destroy a lot of it. I think that is what's going to carry the day. Quite frankly, I haven't seen from the spacefaring nations or maybe even the United Nations a lot of progress on issues of preserving the space environment. We've been talking about it for a long time, but I haven't seen a lot of progress. So to be quite honest, I'm actually kind of banking on the space services companies that are populating LEO with satellites to be the ones to carry the day, and maybe they won't clean it up, but they're going to make sure that they don't mess it up.
Nice. Stewart.
I'll switch to my natural accent, which you guys don't normally hear because my family's from Glasgow. So, Angela, I think you can relate very clearly to the cultural problem that faced the Scots for 200 years until they decided to unite the clans and rise up and became their own country. So if you think it can't be done, it can be done. Robert the Bruce proved it in 1314 on the Battle of Bannockburn, and it can be done again. And now the question is, the whole world needs to come together, unite the clans, and get the space cleaned up, and we can do it. We've got the technology, we can rebuild them, we can do it all. It's all there. And you just have to put your faith in the innovation, put your faith in the need, and understand one very important thing. If we wreck it for space, we wreck it for the ones who will lose the most. The biggest players lose the most. So they'll do the right thing. In the end, everyone will do the right thing. Believe it.
Man, I mean, I gotta tell you, Stewart, I'm ready to dig up my tartan, man, for the Jah clan from the Black Colin Mountains on the Isle of Skye. I'm ready.
Freedom!
I'm ready. Yeah. Love it.
I'm not qualified to be on a panel with Stewart. I just want to say that.
Oh, come on, man. Come on. So look, I mean, I'd love to hear, yeah, Thierry, go ahead.
Just interesting discussion again. And what I would say, I hope or believe, or I don't know the appropriate English word for that, but then we are looking from Earth, looking the space and looking lots of things there. But and about the concern we have about debris, and so the most exposed are the people in ISS. And when we listen to Thomas Pesquet looking down to the Earth, saying, "Oh, we don't see any frontier." Okay, the planet, the Earth seems so fragile. Please take care of it. Okay, so I think we have to take care of both sides, space and Earth. And really looking from ISS, I believe Earth is so small and we have to be all together protecting our environment. It's thank you.
Thank you, Thierry. Anyone else? All right, how about if we get Pranav? Is Pranav in the house?
Hello, thank you very much, guys. It's really wonderful. This is my first time I'm actually watching the debate or discussion go on live. Most of the time I watch it on YouTube. But my question is really about, by and large, the discussion is that space actors should do their own thing. And even when it comes to about stories, we talk about we talk about how we should direct stories about space sustainability towards space actors, right? But a lot of times, and this was brought up in the very beginning of the discussion, that space actors do not have the incentives to do the right thing, to sort of behave in space, because it's not in their business interest to do that. So why isn't there more discussion about directing our narratives, directing our stories towards the governments to take more action? Sometimes, even with government action, we see non-compliance on Earth, right? The Volkswagen case, Volkswagen had a grotesque cheating in the side, and there was no mechanism, there was no proper mechanism to enforce compliance. So I know in the United States, culturally, it's very unacceptable for government to impose its regulation, to bring its visible hand and sort of meddle with the space policy and meddle with free open markets and free economics. But what should the governments really do to enforce compliance to private space actors? Something like what we do on Earth here with regard to emissions and protecting our forests and protecting endangered land and species. Thank you.
All right, anybody?
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said before. I don't think there has been any great communication of any impact to terrestrial life from any of the problems that we're discussing in space. And right now there are no rules in space, so there's nothing to actually, there's actually nothing that you can point out that anyone is doing that is right or wrong. And we've had, I think one of the most interesting things we had recently was we had an active Chinese satellite that struck a piece of debris. And they weren't, you know, they didn't avoid it, probably because they didn't have the data needed to even know, either know they were going to collide or know what to do. So one of the things that we need before we can do a lot of the things that you're asking for is we need to have more and better data on what's happening up there, quite frankly, because we don't have any rules. We don't know necessarily what's going on. So really that it would be hard to know what to do. It would be hard to know what to advise the governments of the world to do based on what we know today.
Thank you so much. So look, this is the final kind of countdown to close things up. So with that, I would like to just go around, do a tour de table, and just kind of final statements, comments. Who wants to go first? Yury.
Yes, I'm ready if you ask me.
Yeah.
I think that good discussion, and the last question is also a great concern. We haven't speak about governmental participation in regulation of this issue. I think that the potential for culture-related risks are especially important to study for international big projects, and where the government participation is the most important. For instance, for so-called moon village programs with permanent presence of the man on the moon and long exploration missions to Mars and beyond. And I think the main problem that government, it's necessary to give advices to government. Governments need such kind of advices, and our role is to give the proposals, prepare the materials in order the decision will be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yury. Stewart.
Thank you, Moriba. Thank you, everyone. It's a privilege to be on this panel. It's a privilege to share ideas with all these different cultures. I just think the discussion is essential. I think the points raised are worthy of continuing. I think your concept of storytelling and to the woman from the Smithsonian who asked the question, I mean, we all end up developing our own story. And it's got to do with scientific basis for precision knowledge of what's going on in space. But that's part of the question. The other part is, how are we going to work together as humanity to solve a challenging problem that affects us all? And the exciting part is that we're going to be able to do it. And so I have a lot of faith, and I really appreciate every single guest on here and the perspectives they bring. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you so much. Thierry.
Yes, thank you, Moriba. Very interesting approach. I like the angle of approaching the space. Usually we speak about performance and technology and so on, and this is another aspect which has to be considered really and as the population. In order for the population to understand better what is there, what we see, we should explain better this to our surrounding, and to do better in the future. And ready again, your approach, I'm ready to discuss more, and we have to be innovative to address defense people or governmental authorities or population to be innovative, communicating what's good for everyone coming from what we're deploying in space. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Doug.
All right. Yeah. First, thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed this. You said something, I think you started saying a couple of years ago, and this is on a very technical topic of orbit determination and trying to quantify collisions. You said, when you've done all this amazing scientific work with your algorithms and your data, and then you come up with an orbit and two orbits that may intersect, and then you say, this is the missed distance or whatnot. You said something on top of that where you said, that's just your opinion. And someone else is going to do, they're just as good as you. They have a PhD in astrodynamics, and they're going to give you their opinion. And you're both wrong, actually. We know that. That's just the nature of estimation. And so one of the things that I'd like to call for is, number one, I think there's no doubt we need more data, and we need more people that can process that data. And I really would call up for independent sources. I'm really glad to see a lot of groups around the world that are starting to develop that capability. And then communication. And I think that these are steps that we can take that will, I don't know about the rest of the things we discussed when getting to intent and what do we do. They're all underpinned by having an understanding of what's happening up there. So I just want to call out more data, more opinions, and let's communicate those to each other.
I love that, Doug. Here's what I want to tell everybody, right? Look, I honor, respect, and appreciate each and every one of you, my guests on this, having taken time out of your busy schedules for this. I think it's a great conversation. We explored many things. Part of my own childhood trauma, all the way up to how to talk to Japanese people and all this other stuff, right? It's this is exactly the sort of conversation that I envision that we have, something candid, something unscripted, but meaningful. I think it's clear that we're only scratching the surface on the importance of having these conversations. And so I'd like to invite all of you to continue to think about opportunities where we have a round 2 and round 3 and 4 and so on, to make some measured progress along the way. And I think something to Stewart, to your point, and I think it was one of the questions that Hussein had asked when you said, because I have hope. That's exactly it, man. It's like people say, when I go around and I give talks and I meet with people, everything from children in grade school all the way to senior citizens and stuff. It's like, okay, there are all these issues, but why do you do this stuff? And it's yeah, I have hope, and I have hope in us. I firmly believe that we'll find a way. Certainly having these sorts of conversations and communicating is a path to getting to that. And I think at the end of the day, we may not all agree with each other, but harmony is what we can achieve. We're not going to achieve unity because we're not all the same. So even though we're more similar than different, honoring and respecting and embracing our differences is a good thing, and working towards harmony. So with that, I like to bring this to a close, and I'm going to pass it back to Chiara and Torsten to close things off as they usually do. But look, very honored and thankful for everybody, and especially the people that attended and asked some great questions and got on stage. So with that, Chiara and Torsten.
Thank you so much, Moriba, and thank you to all of you on the panel. This has been a really, really interesting discussion. I'm very honored that I got to sit back and listen to all of this. First of all, quick save the date for our next Moriba's VOX Populi, which will be happening on the 9th of December at 4 p.m. CT and 10 a.m. EST. And yes, I want to quickly give you a rundown of our next events as well, because we have quite some awesome things coming your way. So on the 19th of October at 4 p.m. CST, we have our next 33 minutes with Dr. Agnieszka Lubkaszczyk about space collaboration. Then, notably on the 21st of October at 1 p.m. CST, Powering Space has their second Lunch and Learn. So that's a really nice 1 hour long lunch where you can just discuss and debate and meet a lot of people in the space sector. On the 22nd of October at 4 p.m. CST, we have our next Space Café Germany by Andreas Schippers, who will be talking to Matthias Maurer and Reinhold Ewert. about the next German in space. And this will, of course, be in German. And on the 26th of October at 4 p.m. CST, we have 33 minutes with Remco Timmermans, who will be reporting live from the IAC in Dubai. All our events are going to be on Eventbrite. And as always, we would love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily and biweekly newsletters. And if you want to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support really does help us greatly to continue our work. So just take out your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global. Thank you all so much for your interest today and for posing all these really interesting questions. And a huge thank you, of course, to Moriba, Doug, Thierry, Yury, Darren, and Stewart for this exciting conversation. And of course, a huge thanks to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job week in and week out. So I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you in the next weeks. And in the meantime, don't forget to visit our website and follow us on social media. And most importantly, don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you so, so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.